All right. So now we're going to talk about related party transactions. Okay. So when you look at the related party relationship with for any transaction, right? What is it we do with a related party? So which is a transfer of resources, services, or obligations. So essentially, is there a transfer of assets? Are you providing any services? Are you buying any services? Or are you taking on any obligation between a reporting entity and a related party? And remember, related party includes both a person or an entity, right? Regardless of whether a price is charged. I think this is very, very important. Even though it's free, we need to, in a way, appropriately disclose, right? We need to appropriately disclose. It doesn't matter whether it's free or for which a price has been charged or not. Okay, Nitin. Okay, let's take this with the help of an example. Purchase or sale of goods, finished or unfinished. Purchases or sale of property and other assets, rendering or receiving of services, leases, transfer of research and development, transfer under license agreement, transfer under finance arrangements, including loan and equity contribution in cash or in kind, provision of guarantees or collateral, commitment to do something if a particular event occur or does not occur in the future, including executory contracts, settlement of liabilities on behalf of the entity or by the entity on behalf of that related party, and management contracts, including for deputation of employees. So it is not necessary, I think again, we just kind of repeating this, not necessary for any consideration to be passed for related party transaction. And all of these are examples of related party transaction, which is purchase or sale of goods, purchase or sale of property, renting or receiving of services, leasing, transfer of research and development, license agreements, under finance arrangement, guarantees or collateral, commitments to do something, or settlement of liabilities or manage. So essentially, if you look at it, as I said at the beginning, anything and everything potentially is covered here. It is extremely hard and will be rare for you to say that there is a transaction which has happened between a related party, right? And that is not to be considered as a related party transaction. Okay, so you got to be extremely careful. So once you have nailed down as to is there a related party relationship, yes, between an entity and a person, or an entity and another entity, because of variety of relationship, either being in control or a joint control or a significant influence, or in a way or other, in a way, related relationships which we saw, like an extended family, in from that perspective. If you are in that related party relationship, and then are you transacting with that related party, if the answer to that is yes, then all those transactions are required to be considered, even though you're not making or you're not paying a consideration for that related party transaction. Okay, so the other important elements when you talk about compensation includes all employee benefits, including employee benefits to which in AS 102 the share-based payment applies. Compensation includes short-term monetary such as wages, salary, social security, annual leave, sick leaves, profit sharing, bonuses, all kind of stuff, right? Post-employment benefits such as pension. So it is in the context of when you're trying to make disclosures for related party compensations. Other long-term employee benefit, including long service leave or sabbatical, jubilee or other long service benefits, long-term disability benefits, and if they're not payable wholly within 12 months after the end of the period, profit sharing, bonuses, and deferred compensation, termination benefits, and share-based payments, all of them are covered as far as the compensation disclosures are concerned with related party. When you look at the transaction with the government, right, that's where some exceptions are. Government refers to government agencies and similar bodies, whether local, national, or international, right, in a way, from that perspective. And a government related entity is an entity that is controlled or jointly controlled or significantly influenced by a government. So now we've understood the related party, we've understood the related party transactions, we've understood certain exceptions to some of these definitions in a way we talked about. Now we're going to focus on what are the disclosures in a way which are required to be given, okay, between the related party and the for if I have a related party, then what is it the reporting entity needs to disclose, and if I have a related party transaction, then what is it I need to disclose, okay. So disclosure requirements are broadly classified into two categories, right? Required disclosure of relationship, even if there are no related party transaction, okay? So I need to disclose certain relationships. And category two, required disclosure of relationship and items only when there are related party transactions, okay? So two types of disclosures. One is I need to disclose my relationship even though there are no transaction, and the second is I need to, of course, disclose related party transactions and the related relationships only if there are transactions. If there are no transactions, then those disclosures are not required. So what all I need to disclose, right? Disclosure requirements for related parties. I need to disclose all related party relationships where control exists irrespective of transactions held. Name of the entity's parent, ultimate controlling party, key management compensation must be disclosed. Separate disclosure for each of the related party category, which is parent, subsidiaries, associate, KMP of the entity or its parent, etc. Disclosure where there have been related party transactions. If there are related party transaction, then I need to disclose the amount outstanding balance, including commitments, terms, condition, guarantees, provision for doubtful debt, the expense recognized during the period, all of that. So you think of a P&L, you think of a in a way balance sheet, and you look at anything which goes into in a way from a off balance sheet. If there any off balance sheet, that also I need to disclose. More disclosures, right? That related party transactions are made on terms equivalent to those that prevail in arm's length should be made only if such terms can be substantiated, right? It may be disclosed in aggregate for similar type of transaction and with similar categories of related parties, right? And again, particulars of transaction with individual related parties frequently be too voluminous if there are too many, and hence again you can aggregate it. This is not done in such a way as to obscure the importance of significant transactions, right? Purchase or sale of goods are not aggregated with purchase or sale of fixed assets, okay? Not a material related party transaction with an individual party is clubbed in an aggregated disclosure. KMP compensation, we need to disclose that as well. Total compensation to KMP, compensation for each of the following categories. So I need to, in a way, break them down: short-term, post-employment, other long-term termination, and share-based payments. And if an entity, in a way, obtains a key managerial personnel from another entity, remember the type of the relationship we talked about, you are not required to apply the requirement of the compensation paid, because then you are anyway obtaining a services. Let's look at extract of a standalone financial statement of a company, right? Let's look at the quality of the disclosure. Very, very robust disclosures which is made by the company. And so list of related parties and the relationship. So we look at the transaction pursuant to IND AS 24. So related party and there's relationship. Subsidiaries, these are my subsidiaries. 24. Then I have a joint venture. These are my key management personnel, right? Which is the whole-time director, my CEO, my CFO, again full-time director, and then also the company secretary. All of them are identified as my key management personnel. And then I have directors. They're also my related parties. All the directors, whether executive or otherwise, right? All of them are also my related parties. Now, entities in which director or his or her relative is a member or director, all of that is also has been identified as my related parties, right? And then we have also identified relatives of KMP and directors, which we needed to identify. Post-employment benefit plan entities, that also we have identified. with whom the company had transaction during the current year or previous year. So only here limited in a way disclosures, which is again required only if you have transaction, then only you need to disclose, otherwise you are not for some of these relationships. And then the whole category of different types of transactions, right? So what is the transaction I have done over the current year, for the previous year, and the balances. So all the transaction and the balances, right? On employee benefit, on personal post separation, all the categories you saw, right? Reimbursement, the share based payment, the director sitting fees. Again, I paid to above include the following material transaction for a couple of individuals identified there, because they are important stakeholders in the company. And then share-based payments, that also been identified. Director sitting fees is identified. Then transaction with subsidiaries, right? One was with individuals, the person. Now with subsidiaries, this is my purchase, sale, miscellaneous income, share-based payments, reimbursement of expenses, investments, guarantees, and collaterals. All of that is what has been covered, and more of it, right? And then again include the material transaction, right, which is purchase of product, the miscellaneous income with the name of the entities as well, wherever it is relevant. All of that is in a way given, right? Whole host of disclosures. I think the important thing is whole host of disclosure, and this is just to give you a perspective, right? That if you were to actually look into a related party, so you identify a related party relationship, you identify all my related party transaction, you in a way club them, group them in some logical order and sequencing, and then make sure that all of that has been disclosed appropriately from a financial statement perspective. So as a reader, I have full appreciation and understanding of related party transaction. Then again, all the transactions with my joint ventures, with others, which is your post-employment benefits, all of that I have also disclosed. And again, if there are certain other material transactions, they're also in a way very, very comprehensive set of disclosures in a way made by the company. There are certain exemptions from disclosures we talked about the government related entities, right? It relaxed the disclosure requirement for some government related entities. A reporting entity is exempt from disclosure requirement in relation to related party transaction, outstanding balances, and commitment with a government having control, joint control, or significant influence over it. Another entity over which the government has control, joint control, or significant influence. Disclosure required from such entities include name of the government and nature of the relationship, the nature and amount of the individually significant transaction, and for transactions that are collectively significant, qualitative and quantitative indication of collectively significant transactions, factors which are considered in determining the significance of transactions. So let's look at an example. Um, Omega Limited is a manufacturer of television sets. Kappa Limited, a distributor, has been purchasing television sets from past 3 years on a regular basis. Omega Limited acquires controlling stake in Kappa Limited on 1st of June 2019, and hence there is a parent subsidiary relationship now. They become now related party. However, the stake was sold on 15th of March 2020. Omega Limited financial year ends on 31st of March 2020. Throughout the year, both the companies have entered into purchase and sale transaction with each other. Okay. For the year ended 31st March 2020, which period transaction with Kappa Limited should be disclosed by Omega Limited in its financial limited, which is nothing but transaction between this period, right, when they become the parent and subsidiary. Should disclose the transaction with Kappa Limited in its financial statement for the year ended 31st March 2020. However, it should only include the transaction during the period when Kappa Limited was subsidiary, that is 1st June 2019 to 15th of March 2020. Transaction during the remaining period should not be disclosed as there is no related party, including your balances, right? That also we don't need to disclose. So quickly, in a way, trying to cover the difference between Ind AS and Indian GAAP, right? So there is a difference in the definition, right? When you look at a close member of the family of a person, Here, the close member include those family members who may be expected to influence or be influenced by that person in their dealings. So it's slightly open-ended, right? That person, children, spouse, or domestic partner, brother, sister, father, and mother, children of that person's spouse or domestic partner, slightly expanded definition, from a spouse relationship perspective, dependent of that person or that person's spouse or domestic partner is much wider. Here, relatives of an individual, and the relative is defined as spouse, son, daughter, brother, sister, father, and mother, who may be expected to influence or be influenced, right? It doesn't cover, in greater degree of detail as what is there under IND AS 24. That's on the person. And then in terms of the state controlled enterprise, here we have an exception. There's an extended coverage of government enterprise as it defines a government related entity as an entity that is controlled, jointly controlled, or significantly influenced. Here we are only talking about the control. Okay, so government refers to government agency, similar bodies, so it's much wider again. And when you look at again KMP, here KMP covers key management personnel of the entity only. Here KMP of the parent as well as India's also cover the entity or any member of a group of which it is a part, providing KMP services also, right? So if you're providing a KMP services, then also you also become in a way related party. Looking at some of the key questions, right, to test your knowledge, let's go through them. Mr. X is a domestic partner of Miss Y, and Mr. X has an investment in entity A. Okay, Mr. X is a domestic partner of Miss Y. Mr. X has an investment in entity A, and Miss Y has an investment in entity B. Okay, now what all we need to do? Examine when can a related party relationship establish from the perspective of entity A or B financial statement. Will entity A and entity B be related parties if Mr. X has only significant influence over entity A and Ms. Y also has significant influence over entity B? Okay, so let's just go through the question quickly. Mr. X is a domestic partner of Ms. Y. That means what? They are related parties. Now, Mr. X has an investment in entity A and Ms. Y has an investment in entity B, right? X has an investment in entity A and Y has an investment in entity B. Today, currently, we don't know what is the size of this investment, right? Now, examine when can a related party relationship establish from the perspective of entity A or B financial statement. Between entity A and B financial statement, when is there a related party relationship? Now, will entity A and B be related parties if Mr. X has only significant influence over entity A and Ms. Y has only a significant influence over entity B? So we got to do two things. One is that we got to explain the scenarios in which there will be related party relationship. The second is they have to comment on if I have only significant influence, then what exactly is the outcome, right? So let's talk about the solution. Okay, Mr. X controls or jointly, if Mr. X controls or jointly controls entity A, then entity B is related to entity A when Ms. Y has control or joint control or significant influence over entity B. That's one scenario. If Ms. Y controls or jointly controls entity B is related to entity A. If, right, when Mr. X has control, joint control, or significant influence over entity A. Now, Mr. X has significant influence over entity A and Ms. Y has significant influence over entity B. Now, they are anyway related. A and B are not related to each other because only a case of significant influence. They are related, but they only have significant influence. But these entity A and entity B are not related to each other. Okay, let's look at another question. Sigma Limited has 6 directors on its board. Out of the 6 directors, Mr. Deepak is an independent director. Okay, Mr. Deepak is an independent director playing an important role in the board and also contributes in decision making for all the major and relevant activity of the company. for which Sigma Limited pays him INR 100,000 as sitting fees for every meeting of board of directors he attends. Okay. Further, Ms. Rita is a non-executive director on the board of director of Sigma Limited, for which she is paid a sitting fee of INR 80,000 for each meeting she attends. Over the year, both Mr. Deepak and Ms. Rita have attended 4 meetings of board of directors. Both Mr. Deepak and Ms. Rita have attended 4 meetings of the board of directors. All right. So one is getting paid 100,000, the other one is getting paid 80,000, right? The finance head of the company is of the opinion that the sitting fees paid should not be disclosed as related party transaction, considering that Mr. Deepak and Ms. Rita are not employees of Sigma Limited. Whether the opinion of the finance head to not disclose the fees paid to independent and non-executive director as related party transaction is correct as per IND AS 24. So now the first thing you have to establish is, are they related parties, right? So they are, directors are related parties. If they are a related party, if I paid a compensation to them, whether by whatever name called, is that a related party transaction? Possibly yes. Okay. Key management personnel are those persons having authority and responsibility for planning and directing and controlling the activity of the entity. As per IND AS 19, employee benefits may provide services to an entity on a full-time, part-time, permanent, casual, temporary. For the purpose of the standard, employee include director and other management personnel. Basis the above guidance, it can be concluded that Mr. Deepak and Ms. Rita are key management personnel of Sigma Limited under IND AS 24 by virtue of their designation. They have the authority and responsibility for planning, directing, and controlling the relevant activities. And also AS 19 provides services by employees on a part-time basis, and therefore the opinion of the finance head that they are not employees of Sigma Limited is incorrect. So an entity shall disclose key management personal compensation in total and category wise, short-term, post-employment, and other long-term. Therefore, Sigma Limited should disclose the sitting fees paid to Mr. Deepak and Ms. Rita as employee benefits in its financial statement, like we saw in the example in which the company has done all robust disclosures. All of that is what needs to be disclosed. So disclose, and disclose. With this, thank you very much. So related party as a topic is, again, is not a complex topic. What you need to do is to understand the construct as to why this is important. This is important to give the reader information about all transaction between the entity and the related parties. Related parties are those person or persons with reference to that entity or other entity or entities. And then we try to identify that what type of person or what type of entities are to be considered as related parties, essentially where there is control, where there is joint control, where there is significant influence, and that extended chain. All of them are generally considered to be related parties, subject to such exceptions and such deviations, which we talked about. And then any transaction which you do between these related parties, they are to be captured and disclosed appropriately, again, subject to certain limitations and exceptions. With this, thank you very much.